Do you want to stab at it? No, where to begin? I couldn't say yes to that question. If I said to myself that I feel like spaces at Cambridge belong to me, I know that I wasn't being honest with myself. But it's okay. I'm aware of the fact that I'm functioning in someone else's, well, like they've set it up, it's been there for a long amount of time. And things like Fly and the ACS are our ways of like trying to claim some small islands within this vast sea of privilege and wealth. And it's quite interesting because I want to go into politics eventually, and the political sphere definitely doesn't belong to me. Me being black, working class, female, it's someone else as well that you need to sort of pick at.
I think Freshers made me aware that I'm not the norm, basically. I've never been made more aware of being a Muslim, being Pakistani English, until I got here. I feel like, in a sense, I could kid myself in like secondary school or whatever to be like, oh, I'm an outsider because my interests don't correspond to their interests. They don't know about the bands that I like or the books that I read. Whereas like here, it's like you're aware that, oh, I'm an outsider, but it's not because of the band I like or the books I read. It's because people have already assumed I wouldn't like those things because I wear a hijab or because of the colour of my skin. So it's like your skin colour and who you are makes you really obvious and invisible at the same time. It's just all about comfortability. Like if we can see her as not being the same as us, then we won't feel guilty about kind of excluding her.
But I think the first time I couldn't really pinpoint why I was so out of my comfort zone. To be honest, I think it was a lot to do with it was also unfamiliar. I wasn't used to being different in a way that I kind of felt I was, rightly or wrongly. Coming to Cambridge made me aware of my race in a way that I hadn't always been. And more than that, it made me aware of my race in a political sense. Not that that's necessarily a negative thing. I thank Cambridge for that, really.
Yes, we could say maybe postgrad is more diverse. I think it's not as diverse still for black students from this country, from Europe generally, from Africa, from Latin America. Everybody wants to conform to what Cambridge is about. Englishness and posh Englishness. So instead of having a space where people come in with their diversities and we shape the institution, everybody wants to conform. That I find very troubling.
I feel like I consciously have to like police my own behaviour in certain ways, especially when I'm around my peers and stuff, which will, 9 times out of 10 be all white people, because I'm always conscious of the fact that for a lot of the times, a lot of people have told me I'm the first person of colour that they like have befriended, or the first person from Somalia, or the first Muslim, or all these other things. And I'm always very conscious of the fact that I'm basically the poster girl for all of your ethnic friends, and so my behaviour or whatever I do or say, I always have to be quite conscious of.
We almost want to shy away from parts of our identity because we don't want to be reduced to those identities.
The way that you can kind of feel people like policing your movement, even just by watching you, and think there's loads of incidents of reporters kind of questioning where you're going, if you're a woman or person of colour, like just a sense of what are you really doing here. Do you ever feel like sometimes in conversations with friends and stuff, you want to like interject and be like, that's problematic, or all the time?
It's really difficult because you don't want to be the stereotype of being like, you can't say that, you can't say that. The whole kind of like laddish culture here of like, oh yeah, we can make a joke, we can make banter about anything, and then they kind of intellectualize it by saying, well yeah, freedom of speech, so you can't stop me. It's something that we kind of have to battle with because we don't want to like alienate ourselves and ostracize ourselves further by being like, stopping every kind of social gathering and being like, you're problematic, stop saying what you're saying. But they should stop saying what they're saying. So it's really difficult that we're the ones that kind of have to take on the burden and be like vigilante, like black women kind of coming in and being like, don't say that.
And then with that comes the idea like, the whole angry black woman, which is basically just a pointless argument used to derail someone and just has misogynistic tones of just shutting down a woman basically of colour.
I do find I've had a lot of platforms to bring up these issues and to like present them to people and be like, listen to me, like you're not seeing my side of the story, you're not seeing my point of view. So I'm really grateful for that, but it is quite tiring to have to be doing that all the time, day after day. And then if you don't do it, then you find yourself being you find yourself being faded out, and you find that you are living a life very different to everyone else, and that can get quite lonely. So either way, it's difficult.
I have a friend from Malawi in college in third year, so that was, she's still like my rock / mom / sister, even though she doesn't like to be referred to as mom, but let's face it, so I think she helped me through a lot of last term, and she still helps me now.
Luckily I happen to be a member of a college that is highly cosmopolitan, so I see people from Africa there, and we sort of, acknowledge each other a lot. So that has been really helpful.
People ask me like, why do you need an African Caribbean society? Why do you all hang out together? Why can't you be like, why don't you integrate yourself into the wider society, into Cambridge? Why are you separating yourselves? Isn't this making racism worse? And you have to take a step back and you have to breathe, and you're like, no, it's not making racism worse. I know people forget that actually humans always divide themselves. And then when you divide yourself based on your ethnicity, it's really obvious. But when I look around my college, people are divided up based on their class. They divide themselves based on the sports they play, on the type of background they're from, the type of films they watch, or the music they listen to. People are always dividing themselves, and not in a malicious way, but you group with people who you have something in common with, people you can share experiences with. So when I'm with the African Caribbean Society, I have shared experiences with these people. It's ridiculous to say that all my friends are black, because if all my friends are black, I wouldn't have very many friends in Cambridge. Most of my friends are not black, they're British, they're white middle class like everybody else, and some of my best experiences in Cambridge have been with those people. But when I want to have shared experiences with someone who understands this aspect of my life, then I'm going to be hanging out with people who are from African and Caribbean backgrounds. I'm a Christian, I hang out with Christians all the time. I like to listen to certain types of music, I spend time talking to people who listen to that kind of music. So when people say that black people separate themselves off, I think once it shows kind of ignorance on their part of the fact that grouping yourself is something that everyone does, and it also shows they don't understand why it's necessary for me to seek out that kind of experience. They don't have to search out for people who are like them and search for people who understand them from their background, because they're everywhere. I think especially in colleges, because it's so split and so divided, when you're from a minority background, it's going to be very, very few of you in each college. So it's necessary then to go a bit further to make sure that you feel at home and you feel that you have these people who you can relate to.
This is an anonymous message from a woman of colour at Cambridge. I find myself making excuses for people's racism when it's in a space I need or I feel like I should fit in. The reality is that I suppress one side of me in order to appease people, in order to be accepted, in order to not completely ostracize myself. As a queer woman, I have to hide part of myself from my family. As a BME woman, I have to hide parts of myself from queer spaces. I'm sick of seeing so many spaces where the intersections of race and sexuality are crushed in favour of the privileged few. I write this anonymously because I can't come out, because I'm afraid of being ostracized from the spaces I've created for myself, and because I could be anyone and everyone. Understand that black queer women need spaces too.
People of colour are marginalised in our society, but the voices and opinions of women of colour especially don't make it to the forefront very often. And that's always something that you're thinking about as a woman of colour, because you can't separate your race from your gender. So you have to always understand that even in narratives about people of colour who have lost their lives in the media, it's almost always men. Those are the kind of things that we need to be tackling. There needs to be some kind of parity in our idea of the worthiness of lives.
So tell me about the decision to set up Flag, how you guys went about it.
As a Gatonian, actually, I don't want to say it was geographical, but I feel that practically I felt very distant from the social dimensions of the Cambridge experience. I hadn't managed to find the ACS down that Freshers Fair, and I hadn't managed to find out any sort of black networks that were happening at the university. And I remember saying to Susie, who was on us at the time, I don't know if there are any black people here, but I'd really love to meet some if you know where they are. Do you perhaps have an idea? She was like, yeah, I know there's these other two girls that I'm really keen about founding like a black women's network here. And And that's kind of how it started. So we had this meeting and we were like, what we're going to do, what we're going to call it, is it going to be just black women, or are we going to open it up? We decided to open it up, which I think is really, really important.
Yeah.
I really wanted to find somewhere I could voice part of my experience here that I felt maybe my other friends wouldn't be able to understand.
Yeah.
And because I couldn't find one, I thought I might as well make one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Fly is a space where it's like kind of exclusively women of colour, and you don't have to kind of carry that kind of burden of your race and your gender with you. You know, it's like that, oh, this is how I'm going to be perceived. I have to constantly be aware of how I'm being perceived and constantly kind of edit and re-edit. Yeah. It's just like, oh, I can just be myself and bring myself to this, and my experiences are going to be shared experiences. And so it's just really
I find it difficult to voice my opinions about like race and things in a college environment, because I don't think anyone like really gets it.
Yeah.
And like to have a space like Fly where people understand, it's quite empowering, and it makes me feel like actually my views are legitimate and I can then talk about them a bit more. Because before I'd kind of be like a bit skeptical, even like to be filmed today, because I was like, who's going to see this? What are they going to think? They might think my opinions are awful and stuff like that. But actually Fly has like taught me like that, my opinions about it, and like I should voice them.
I think Fly's been a great forum for being able to see that, to meet very like-minded people, and a space to sort of talk about things that you didn't know you really wanted to talk about until you felt other people expressing them.
You may think because you share certain characteristics that you share everything else, and actually we all come from very different backgrounds, we all have very different experiences. Though there may be the assumption that because we're both black women we must share like an identical oppression. That's not the case at all. When someone explained that they never really felt like they could engage with the struggle because they didn't feel like they ever really had it in the same way, even though they were black, they were a black woman. And that was a really interesting experience to hear, and it changed my perceptions a lot at the time.
I don't think people go to ACS hoping that they'll find carbon copies of themselves that they can
not.
Yeah, fingers crossed. But I think people go there because for diversity,